Hello, and welcome back to the channel. As most of you know, I'm Topher. And for those of you who don't know and just randomly decided to click on this video, welcome to the channel. I'm Topher. Thank you for stopping by. So it's first time doing just kind of a review video versus a reaction. Obviously, the channel is Topher Reacts Cinema, and my other channel, Topher Reacts. Very reaction-based content that we have. But I just got home from seeing Saw X. One of my coworkers and I went to see it after work. We've been planning on it for a couple weeks, and over the last couple of months, we've been catching up on the Saw franchise because I've watched an abundance of review videos and whatnot throughout the history of Saw on YouTube. CC's World is one of my favorite channels. I love just his content in general. So I've been relatively caught up on the Saw timeline, but I hadn't seen all the movies completely, and she had never seen them. So we've been working our way through them, and last night we watched the last two. So we watched Spiral and Jigsaw. Spiral was less than our favorite, we'll say that. So we weren't really sure how we were going to feel about this. We knew that coming into it, it was going to be a flashback movie. It was taking place in the past. So we knew certain characters were going to be present and alive. And that's all I really went into the movie knowing. I didn't want to know anything else. I didn't read any of the synopsises. I hadn't watched any of the trailers. I don't know whether she did or didn't, but I wanted to go into it as blindly as I possibly could. And we decided to go for the earliest screening possible, which was at 6 o'clock, just on the off chance that it was not a great movie and we needed a palate cleanser. Because after we watched Spiral last night, like I said, it was less than our favorite film, and we needed a palate cleanser. We had to watch another movie. But we found after watching Saw X that we did not need a palate cleanser in any way, shape, or form. I absolutely loved this film. I loved it. Yes, there are things that I would change, or things I have questions about, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But overall, I really enjoyed this film. It's probably one of my favorite in the franchise. Before I get into any specifics, just preface, I'm not a movie reviewer. I am not a professional producer. I am not a horror movie aficionado or an expert or anything like that. I'm just a guy who likes to watch movies. So any opinions I have are completely my own. You may have completely different opinions. You may have similar opinions. That is fine. You can feel free to express them down in the comment section. All I ask is that you guys be respectful to me and others. If we can't, then people got to get blocked, and that's how it goes. But as far as things that I enjoyed with this movie, first, I really loved the visuals. Not so much the blood and gore and visceral. Like, yeah, that's always done well, like, except for in 3D when the blood was like pink, which I get for the 3D experience in the movie theaters. I get it, but like for the home release when it's not 3D, I'm just like, just color correct it back to red. But visually, I enjoyed the tone that this movie was setting, because one of the issues that my coworker and I had with Spiral was that it felt like it was a big budget Hollywood movie. Like, it felt like it had a budget and it was using that budget to produce this beautiful movie, which is great. But for me and this series, I like the sort of gritty, dark, almost bluish kind of color toning to the earlier Saw movies, because this movie is not a big, bright, beautiful kind of world. It's dark, it's gritty, it's underground. I like the Saw films having that sort of essence and air about them. So this, while not completely living in that world, it kind of returned to that sort of visual representation of the world, and I really enjoy that, because I feel like it works with this franchise. Another thing visually that they did here, which I hadn't really noticed in some of the more recent videos, were when people are in the traps. Spoiler alert, people get trapped. Some people die. That's all you're going to get from me from right now as far as that goes. But when people were in the traps and start trying to escape or doing whatever they needed to escape, in the old Saw films, you would notice the camera would have like sort of jerky and erratic motions, like zooming in on the victims really really fast and like switching around, and like it can be very jarring. It can be a lot to take in, but I like that sort of erratic nature for this universe. Like when I think of the Saw films outside of just body horror and blood and mutilation and this, that, the other, things that my brain associates with it is that sort of moody color toning, that sort of dark underground feeling, the sort of erratic nature of the camera work where it's like, okay, you can really see the victims brains going a mile a minute, like, okay, I need to get out of this, but I don't know, brain doesn't know where to start and I'm running out of time and shit. And like, I like it. Not everybody does, and that's fine, but I like that for these films. So there were a couple instances with traps where that was happening and I loved just seeing it happen again. The audio, specifically the sound effects and the way they mixed them, I think was very effective, because there were a number of times in this, and maybe it was just the difference of me seeing it in theater and having like that sort of theater sound system versus just watching it in my living room, because this is the first Saw film I've ever seen in the theaters. But there was just something about the way they mixed in the sound effects when the victims were trying to escape the traps that really just kind of hammered the point home. Because there are certain times when people might have been cutting certain things or doing certain things to try and escape, and all of a sudden, like, I could hear it and it's fine, but then is when the intensity was like really picking up, like, okay, I'm running out of time, I gotta escape, and they're like frantically trying to get out of this, like, it would just get louder and more intense. And it's like the sound effects of people injuring themselves made me wince more than the actual visuals, because obviously at this point I've gone through the entire Saw franchise. I've seen people cut off limbs, I've seen people explode things, I've seen people lose this and that, I've seen people be bled dry or dissolve or this, like, I've seen all manner of body horror and mutilation take place in this. So that stuff, while yes, it's still uncomfy, I don't like watching it because I'm like, oh, certain things make me feel uncomfortable. It's really more just those sound effects that really had me like, oh god, it was like some weird, sick, twisted horror ASMR, and it just like it did the job. The sound engineer understood the assignment and they did the damn job, basically. Also, there were a couple of the actors and actresses who had some really good screams on them. It's either Spyro or Jigsaw, the one where they were in the barn game. Where there was one guy who got his leg trapped in the baseboard and it was like potentially being cut off. Me and my coworker were just standing there looking at him like, man, this guy is surprisingly calm for having his leg just kind of on the precipice of not existing anymore. He's just kind of, which, is a valid response, I suppose. He's keeping, cool, calm, and collected. But I'm like, I would be losing. I have a decent-ish pain tolerance, but like, I've never broken a bone or had to endure anything like that, so I don't imagine myself just sitting there kind of, I feel like I would need the liberation of a guttural scream. So there were a lot of victims in this movie who had some just powerful guttural screams to them. They were just screaming from their diaphragm and just full on roaring, and I'm like, oh my god, I could feel the desperation, I can feel the pain, I can feel the fear, I can feel everything. Again, they understood the assignment and they gave me what I needed, so I appreciate, much appreciate. As far as story goes, I think this might be the first time that I genuinely was rooting for John Kramer, because like, throughout all of these films, especially the further we get into the series, I feel like the moral compass for how we're choosing these victims to be put into these traps has gotten so lax. Earlier films, it was like, you were a murderer, you were assaulter of people. I'm not trying to get demonetized. You were, this totally awful person who did these awful things, and I'm trying to save you by putting you through this torture, whatever. And then the later we got into it, it's like, you were somebody who littered. You threw your gum on the ground instead of in the garbage can. You said no to giving me extra cheese at the deli, so I'm gonna throw you in. Like, I just feel like the reasonings for why we were putting people in the traps in some of the later movies were just so ridiculously mundane in comparison. So this movie did a really good job of creating villains, creating characters that I did not like, and I wanted to see them get their comeuppance. There's just something, I don't know, innately dark or sadistic or whatever in us human beings that like seeing people who do bad things get their just desserts, who like seeing people get the retribution they deserve. There's just something satisfying about that, whether it's in movies, in TV shows, in plays, musicals, or real life. Like, you just like seeing people get what's coming to them. So this movie did a great job of creating victims that I did not care to see escape these traps. Whether or not they ended up escaping the traps, I did not care to see them escape. If they all just wound up 10 seconds in, like, oh, I'm dead, I'd be like, great, fantastic, good job, John. Like, they did such a good job of humanizing John Kramer, which is, out of context, just on paper, is a ludicrous idea, because John Kramer is not that. He's not a very innocent person. Yes, he has his mentality that he's never killed anybody. The victims only kill themselves, this, that, and the other. I'm like, girl, don't start fooling yourself. Don't start fooling yourself with this mentality, because you may not have pulled the trigger, but you put the person in this. John, come on. So John's done some awful things in his lifetime, in the past in reference to this movie, and in the future in reference to this movie. But this is the first time where I genuinely was rooting for John to win. I did not want any of these victims to escape or run scot-free, this, that, the other. I was genuinely rooting for John, and that is crazy. That is absolutely crazy. So yeah, they did a great job of creating these villain characters, and they did a great job of just storytelling and really, again, making me empathetic for this character. I'm not excusing any of the things he's done. I'm not explaining them away. I'm just feeling more for him at this particular point in time. So first half of the story, it was very heartwarming. It was John discovering this potential life-saving treatment. It was him. You could see the wonder in his eyes. You could see the optimism, because at this point it seemed as though he had already given up hope. So you could see through his eyes that this was his last chance. He was so happy to find this. And when he discovered that, hey, they didn't actually do shit, he lost it. He lost it. But the first half of the movie was this big sort of hopeful exploration, and just, I genuinely believe that, okay, this treatment worked. Obviously, future sense, I know how Saw 3 ended, so I'm like, obviously it didn't work in the long term, but I was like, okay, optimistic. It worked in the short term for at least, who knows, maybe another year or something, and then maybe cancer came back. But I'm like, okay, it worked. I'm so happy. Like, I genuinely felt warm and happy for him, because he felt like he finally found what he was looking for. And then it all turned into a lie, and he's like, well, okay, well, now people gotta pay, and he gonna put them in some traps and make them pay. So yes, the storytelling did a great job of really making me empathetic for this character, and really making me dislike these other people that he was putting in these traps. As far as dislikes for the movie, there weren't too many. Amanda, character-wise, I think they did great things with Amanda. I love the development of her relationship with Jigsaw, and I feel like it it is a good, it just gives me good, not necessarily filler, but it fills in a lot of unseen things, unseen interactions between them, because we saw he saved her through the trap in the first movie. She was his accomplice in the second movie, accomplice in the third movie, and you could see that she really felt this loyalty and concern and worry and love and respect for John in the third movie, but didn't really know how we got there. So this kind of filled in some of that with some of their interactions, and I just really like that development between them. But dear God, the visual effects they did on her were so damn distracting. Like, obviously, I know this movie is supposed to take place in the past. Obviously, I know it has been many years since those original movies were released. So obviously, as time goes on, people age, people get a little bit older, things change. Maybe we get some lines on our face, some crow's feet, maybe we get a couple sunspots, whatever. Things change, and that's life. People get older, I get older every day. That's fantastic. So I know Hollywood's got this, sometimes great way of de-aging characters, this, that, and the other, but I swear it was so distracting. Every time I looked at her face, I'm like, I wish they had just left her face alone. Like, I would suspend my disbelief and just, like, if she looked a little visibly older or something in comparison to where it was in the first couple movies, I would just suspend my disbelief. I'd be like, okay, that's fine. We've got this older character playing, her younger self. I'm like, that's fine, whatever. I get what's supposed to be happening here. But the way they tried to digitally de-age her, and this heinous, absolutely heinous wig they put her in. Oh dear God, that wig was terrible. That wig was awful. It is a crime. I would not wish that. That wig is almost on par with Gale Weathers' Scream 3 with those choppy bangs that look like she pissed off her hairstylist or something. Like, Amanda's wig was shite in this movie. It was absolutely abysmal. So that paired with the just like almost artificial glow her face had from being digitally de-aged, it was so distracting. Every time she was on screen, I'm like, I just couldn't help but like stare at her like, why would they do this to her? She's a pretty woman. Why would they do this to her? Oh my God, this looks... I'm like, I don't know if she had work done or if this is just digital effects, but this looks awful. Oh my God, I absolutely hated that. Another thing that I didn't care so much for was John's sort of moral compass with some of these traps. Because again, he's very much been this savior to all these victims, and I'm not killing them, they are killing themselves by not listening to my rules, and if only they listen to my rules and show that they truly want to live, then they will escape these traps and they will live and they will be changed for the better, blah 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 blah. I don't agree with that, but that's his mentality. But there were a few times throughout the whole movie where the victims are in these traps and they're doing their best to escape. They're basically doing everything, but of course our traps are on a time limit. So, some of them are like, no, I'm not going to do this. I can't do this. As is, expected. You asked me to break this or jump onto this or something like that I know is going to cause me intense physical pain and discomfort. I'm going to say, maybe not. There's so many times throughout these movies, like I've been watching with my coworker, I'm like, I would just die. I would just die right there. I could not do this. I don't have, couldn't do it. So yes, we start off with some of them like, no, I can't do this. But then eventually they go into doing what they need to do. And they are going in hard. Like they are doing what is being told of them needs to be done in order to escape the trap. And then they just miss it by like another, if the timer had like another 15 seconds, then everything that they had done would have been successful and they would have escaped. But like for me, in John's, if I was going by John's moral compass, he keeps saying that they need to prove that they deserve to live, or this, that they need to have that fight, that will to live in order to escape this. They are showcasing that they have this will to live. They are literally doing everything it requires. They just started maybe like 15 seconds too late. So me, if I had that moral compass, I'd be like, okay, they are doing what they need to do. Like this, I'm trying to avoid giving any actual specifics, but it's like they're doing what needs to be done to escape, essentially. It's almost like, okay, to use like a patch trap, like think back to Amanda in the reverse bear trap, and she had to go diving in that guy's guts to find the key, blah, 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 blah. It's almost like her diving in there, but waiting like another 10 seconds. So like she eventually mustered up the guts she needed to do this, and then she ended up diving in and doing this, but she started 10 seconds too late, and boom, where it's like, hey, she's proven already that she's willing to do what she needs to do to escape here. So my mentality is she's already done what she needs to do. She just started a little too late. So I would just stop this trap. So there were a couple instances with traps like that where I'm like, they did what they needed to do to escape. They just needed 10 more seconds for these other things, these other parts of the trap to do their job. So these other parts of the trap didn't do their job fast enough and release whatever they need to release. I'm like, ah! So I found that a little frustrating. And I think that was the majority of it. So I've babbled long enough. This is far longer than I anticipated talking. So yeah, this was me trying to avoid giving spoilers. Overall, I really enjoyed the film. I thought it was really well done. And yeah, it's definitely worth a rewatch, and I think it's one of my favorites. I can't say that it's my favorite Saw film in the franchise yet. I'd have to watch it again. But it definitely harkens back to some of the earlier films as far as my good, positive feelings about them, which makes sense because it's taking place in that same sort of part of the timeline. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. Really, really enjoyed this. I would highly recommend it. There are a couple instances where if they continue to make Saw films and continue this franchise, which I don't know why they wouldn't at this point, they're this deep in, but also there were only like 8 other people in the movie theater with us, so I was like, oh, this may not be the great opening that they were hoping for, but who knows. It was the first day, and it was 6 o'clock in the afternoon. But if they continued the Saw franchise, there were a couple things that I could see them potentially bringing back in later films if, you know, we continued later in the timeline. There were some interactions or some things I could see being brought back that I'd be like, okay, that'd be a fun little callback. I don't know if they plan to make any more connections to the Spiral set of films, because as of right now, we've got Dr. Gordon, we've got, what was his name? Logan? Was it Logan? The army guy. And we got the undercover cop guy from Spiral as 3 Jigsaw apprentices, follow-up killers, blah, 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 copycats roaming out there in the world. So I don't know if we plan to have some sort of convergence of those, if we plan to add more people to that. I don't know what the plan is, but there are definitely things I could see in this movie potentially coming up in later parts of the timeline that I'd be interested to see. But I would recommend watching it if you enjoy this kind of film. If you don't enjoy this kind of film, don't watch it. It's that simple. But I thoroughly enjoyed, and I hope you guys enjoyed just my random babblings right now. It's gonna be fun to edit, but I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Love ya. Bye.